welcome to the Here and Now. This is a place where ordinary people share extraordinary stories so that we can listen, be inspired, and find that strength within ourselves. My guest speaker today is the world's first female rabab player. Her work in Sikh music therapy and spiritual community leadership was recognized by the Queen of England, who then awarded her the MBE. Today, for the very first time, she shares with us her experience of growing up in a house with an abusive family member. Please join me in welcoming the gentle but extremely courageous Jasvir Kaur Rababan. Hi Jasvir, how are you? And welcome to the Ina Ahluwalia community.
Hi, thank you, Atika. It's a pleasure to be here.
One of the reasons that we wanted to have you on this series as a speaker was because whenever we talk about domestic violence, we always hear women say, but what about the kids? And we wanted to show them a real experience of someone who has been a child in a house with domestic violence. We wanted to show women what their child is possibly feeling right now. And we thought you would be the perfect person to share that with us in a household with domestic violence.
Thank you for entrusting me in this space to be able to share. I don't know if I'm like an example of something that's perfect, like here's a great end result of a bad situation. I grew up, born and raised in England, and I was born in the West Midlands, so it's like in the middle of England near Birmingham. I was born and raised in a family, a Punjabi family, with 3 brothers. So 2 older brothers and 1 younger. I'm the 3rd child. And I think that had its own way to teach me things about life. But being in that situation and seeing how different life can be for the 4 of us, I think that's the real tale. So for my brothers, their experiences of our childhood would be probably very different to mine because of perception, because of processing, and because of personality as well. So we, all 4 of us, didn't turn out the same. We all were raised in that same environment and experienced, layers of abuse, sometimes similar, sometimes different. But we all, I guess we made of it whatever we were supposed to make of it. And I know that doesn't sound very positive. I'm sorry. I don't mean it to sound positive or negative. Just laying out the fact that
it's not meant to be a positive example. It's meant to be just a very, very real representation of, what a child goes through. A lot of the times we, as women, feel like our children are not aware of what's really going on, not aware of the vibe in the house. That they can't really see the violence, that we can protect them from the violence and the abuse. But as a child, I just want you to share with us, as a child, what could you see? What could you feel? How did it make you feel? How did it make you grow emotionally, mentally? What were the repercussions, good and bad, of what you witnessed? And what did you witness?
First thing I would like to say is that children start to hear and process everything around them, the images, the sounds, the experiences, from their first few weeks of being born. Okay? So any parent, including my own, who think that children don't understand and they're not going to remember, or, it's too adult for them to actually comprehend, you're mistaken. And that's the simple truth. I remember a lot. I don't want to say everything, but probably most of the things, going very, very, very far back. And that includes the good and the bad. The bad, of course, they stick out because the pain and the trauma that you carry, and the trauma doesn't kick in straight away. Then you're just in survival mode. And for me, looking back on my childhood, I didn't have much of a childhood. I mean, maybe up until I was like 7 or 8, but after that, I had to survive. I had to adapt to the situation. I had to be ready to protect my younger brother, and wanting to protect my mom as well. So I was in this mode of survival for most of the years that I lived with my family, maybe half and half, you could say. So 50%, I remember there was, lots of good things happening as well, when the violence was increasing. And then the other 50% wasn't great at all. When you're a child, you want your family to be normal. And normal looks like what we see on the TV, or the stories we read about in the children's books, or our friends' families who look like they're always smiling and they're happy and they've got lots of family pictures together and they're going on holidays together, right?
Right.
Everybody wants to be, the cereal packet family, right? And when you feel that you're nowhere near that, you've automatically acknowledged that you're not good enough. And it's not good enough in society's eyes, in other people's, and then even in your own as well. And then the other layers they add on top. So when within the family, when the abuse kicks in, when somebody's angry and they're not shouting positive things at you, right? They're not saying, hey, you're really good, you're a wonderful artist, or you're a wonderful this. They're saying you're terrible, you're not worth it, you're this, you're just scum.
Right.
And you start to accept those labels because you're a child. And there's not many other places for you to process the information, so you store it. And you store it, and you keep storing it, and it keeps going inside you. And on the outside, you're putting on the mask because that's what you're now conditioned to do. Your parents have told you that this stays in the home. Somebody asks what happened to you, what's that mark on your face? You walked into a door, you fell down the stairs, you were fighting with your brothers, right?
Right.
You got hurt when you were playing sports. But you don't speak of this outside of this house, not unless you don't want to come back here, right? So the fear now, it elevates, because if I try to do something about this, if I'm getting hurt, but I can't talk to anybody about it, my friends, my teachers, nobody, I can't seek help, because if I do that, the risk is too big, I lose my family, right? It would be like the ultimate betrayal. And that's how you would feel, like turning on your family. And it's just, as a child, oh my God, it's horrible. It is absolutely horrible. And I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But I know that there's a lot of people who are in that situation, and you have to keep pretending, and you find your way to try to switch off, right? That when you're out of that environment, those few moments that you've got away, whether they're at school or with your friends or playing computer games or whatever it is that you do to try to disconnect and disassociate, it feels like heaven. And you really, really cherish that. Or you do the opposite, where the aggression and the pain within you is then you're projecting that onto other people. You become the bully at school. You become the person that people don't like because you're being mean to them. But you're not being mean because you're a horrible person. You're being mean because you've got all of this pain inside you and you've got no one to talk to about it. So I've now come to see a lot of behavior patterns very differently. It was in my later teens where I started to observe the differences between myself and my brothers, not to judge them. I love them all equally, but to see how each of us have processed the same environment, right? Growing up, to see on TV, when we see violence, we almost accept it as being normal now, right?
Yes.
But when it happens in front of you as a child, and you see two adults, one who is hurting the other, right? It's not fun and it's not entertaining, and there's nothing about it that's okay. It's devastating and it's soul crushing because you love both of those people, but there's nothing that you can do. Because the moment you step into that ring, you're done. You're going to get wiped out. Okay. So to stop two people that you love hurting themselves, the risk is getting hurt yourself. So what do? Do you sit back and watch? Do you lock yourself into a wardrobe so that you don't have to hear the shouting and the screaming and the crying and the pain, right? It was tough. It was really tough. Alcohol abuse was very much present for my father growing up, and my mom was doing her best to survive it. Sometimes I know, I've laughed with my friends as well that, if you didn't take a beating as a kid, then, you're not really Punjabi, right? And I know that we have those sorts of jokes. It's just like banter, but this is a whole other level, like getting a smack around the head because, you broke your mom's favorite vase or something is different to taking a beating with a belt or with a stick, or just even with the hands of a grown adult as a child. That shit hurts, man. And I can feel the pain now. It doesn't just affect you physically. It's almost like all of those memories and strikes get embedded within your muscle memory of who you are. And sometimes certain things, yes, they can trigger it. When you see something on the TV, still can hurt you the same way. How, my brothers despised, my two older brothers, they despised my father. They lost their connection with him as soon as they became teenagers because they didn't respect him. And that fed my father's his hunger to drink more alcohol to numb what he was going through, and that resulted in more violence. There were a lot of factors which fed into the experiences of my family and my father's anger. Trying to survive, I get it. It's difficult when you're setting up home, you're trying to look after your family. We had a corner shop, so that was where I remember most of my childhood. I witnessed my mom like being the victim of racism on a daily basis, where a lot of the customers who would come in would shout abuse at her, and fortunately she knew how to hold her own and she wasn't afraid. So she kept like it was like a baseball bat, or a smaller version of it behind the counter, like if someone was going to come at her, she was ready for them. So some things give me strength that, okay, she wasn't timid, right? But it's like it's all like very discombobulated because like there were so many different factors, right? When you have to survive in society, right, you have to earn a living, you have to look after your kids, you have to deal with racism, you've got to figure out how to pay your next bills, and then you've got to come home and look after kids or figure out their emotions, and you don't have the capacity for it, and you're looking for a way to numb your own pain, right? It's just all of the ingredients for a very bad situation. And now we talk in this day and age more about what privilege is, right? And I think that this is a time of a lot more privilege because our parents didn't have the opportunities and the spaces and the support that we have now. I'm not excusing my father's behavior, so please don't read that wrong. But I think trying to understand what the components were so that you don't take it personally. The worst thing that you can do as a child is feel that your parents hate you or they don't love you, or they're doing it because they didn't want you.
Is that a feeling that came naturally to you when you witnessed abuse?
I don't want to say it came naturally to me. It popped up a little when I was much younger. And this was when my younger brother was very, very small. And I kind of felt like, why is this happening? Why does it have to be like this? We were that family that within our extended family, nobody wanted to associate with. They didn't want to invite us to their functions, to their parties and things, because it was almost guaranteed that my dad was going to get drunk and cause a scene. So there was the longing to want to be with family and to connect with with my cousins and get to know them and have some sort of fun spaces. But then there was the fear of humiliation, of, you know, proving everybody right, that, oh, look, there he is, he's doing it again. Okay, time to send them off, ship them home. Maybe next time we shouldn't just invite them, that might be easier. And constantly feeling like that. You know how it is, like when the families would gather, the men would sit together and they would drink. The women would be cooking together to feed the drunk men, right? And the kids might be playing together, or the ones who like each other are playing together, and the ones they don't like are just sitting by themselves watching TV, you know? So feeling judged by family, by uncles and aunts, was sad. It was very heartbreaking. The saying that it takes a village to raise a child, right? Those are the sorts of values that I have within me. But when I didn't see them like mirrored, or actually real examples of it by the elders around me, it was painful. I saw how they would treat my mom like she was shit, you know? And my dad would hold his own space. He would just have his banter, he would drink, and he would get on with it. He didn't really give a shit what people thought. But to see my mom in those scenarios, that was more painful for me, because my mom, I saw her lose a lot from being a beautiful, healthy, tall, incredible Punjabi woman who came from a background of being loved by her parents. Like she was really adored by her father, right? But from when she got married, her life turned to shit. And I know that story now, but as a child, when I was in that situation, seeing it from the inside, you know, like I didn't have the same compassion for my mother. I felt anger towards her in my teens, because I was like, why aren't you doing anything? Why aren't you getting us out of this, right? As a kid, you don't understand all of the different components, and yes, they stick it through because of the kids, you know. And God, I couldn't do it. Like I bow my head to those women. I'm not saying that you should do that. I'm not saying that you should become a self-sacrifice if it feels wrong to you. But for that generation of women, the ones that couldn't stick it out, they pulled up the courage to get out, and I respect that. But the ones that stuck it through, I respect them equally, because that shit's not easy, man. That's so hard. Right. But I say that now. As a child, I was like, get us out of here. You're the adult. You're my mother. You're responsible for looking after us and protecting us. Get us out of here. There was one time that I remember, I must have been like 13, 14. And oh God, my dad, like his drinking got worse over the years. He wasn't even drunk on this occasion. He was just angry. It was during the daytime. My eldest brother, he decided to sleep in that particular day, right? And my dad was calling him to wake up, and he wouldn't come down. So my mom was in the shop. I was in the kitchen. All I heard was my mom yelling and chasing my dad up the stairs, right? So my dad was a builder, and he was self-employed. So he had like all of his tools and everything, you know, at home. He took a blowtorch, a frigging gas canister, lit it, it's got flames coming out of it, right? He took that upstairs to wake up my brother.
Wow.
And it was lit. And my mom saw this, and I don't know what, like, of course, the horror ran through her body, and she ran up the stairs, and she got there, and I don't know what my dad was going to do with it, but what I do know is that my mom shielded my brother with her hands. So her hands got burnt
Oh.
with the blowtorch to protect my brother. I can't remember who. I think it was me. I don't even remember exactly the details, but one of us called the police and the ambulance. And the police and ambulance, the police especially, they were on a first name basis with us because they'd been called out that many times.
Every
So
by someone within the family or sometimes by someone outside?
combination of both. Sometimes when things got really bad, one of us would call. Sometimes the neighbors would get concerned and, you know, they would hear yelling or whatever. I'm sure they could hear what was going on, and then they would call them, right? We were not a quiet household. So it was always very eventful. So if if the police weren't being called, then the ambulance was being called. So it was always one or the other, and that was a weekly occurrence. And I say that very casually now because that's what it was. That was what normal had looked like for us. And for others, that's horrifying. But as a child, you adapt. If you know that you don't have another choice, maybe if I'd had an aunt or uncle who was willing to come and give some support, maybe it would have been different. I don't know, right? But because I knew there was nowhere else to go, there were no aunts and uncles, there were no grandparents that we could run to. If we did call social services, right, that would have just separated me and my brothers, right? My mom would have probably had a nervous breakdown by herself. Like, what was she supposed to do? She's in a country where she doesn't speak fluent English. Over the years, she's lost her hearing because of the abuse that she's suffered, right? So she's very much dependent on us as her kids to help her to communicate and to just translate things, right? So it would just, everybody's lives would be destroyed. So the only thing that we could do was stick it out together. As imperfect and ugly and brutal as it was better than being separated from each other because that's all we had. So you cling on to those few threads that are there, right? And yeah, it's just bringing it back now.
If you want to take a break, please take a break. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable with us. It takes so much courage to do so. Please take a break. Just take a break.
I just need a second.
Yes, of course, take as long as you need.
This is stuff that I haven't talked about in a long time, and I guess it's only when you start to, you know, with the story that I was just sharing, I think it was me that called the police. And when they came, they asked what happened. And because I was under 16, I needed to have like an adult with me to kind of like sign my statement. I told them exactly what happened because I wanted my dad to go away. I wanted my dad to go and pay for what he had done, not just that day, but for all of the things that he had done. And it wasn't because I didn't love him. I loved him more than anything, but it wasn't okay to just keep hurting us. Now I know that him hurting us was just because he was hurting. But again, that doesn't make it okay. It doesn't justify it whatsoever. You can't do that to kids. Now I'm an adult and I'm in my 30s and I'm processing it, but it's taken me more than half my life to get here and to not let that destroy me. I really wanted him to just, you know, be arrested, go to prison and just, you know, think about what he's done and come back this transformed person who's sorry for hurting us because he loves us, right? That's what I thought would happen. But what happened was that the police took my statement and then they had to ask my mum that because she's under 16, you're the one who gets to decide if we press charges or not. So I'm sitting there, and my dad's in the same room, and I am petrified of my dad, right? So I'm a young teenager, literally trying to get my dad arrested while he's in the room, and he knows that I'm doing this, right? It's like I'm throwing myself onto the train track, and the train is coming, right? The police say to my mum that would you like to press charges? Because she's a minor, she can't make that decision. We have her statement, we can use that if you say that you want to press charges. What does my mum say?
No, she's just making it up. None of it happened.
Yeah, that's literally exactly what she said. I just didn't get it. I was destroyed inside, and they still arrested my dad.
Okay.
But he only went, like, he went to the station for a couple of hours. That was it. And then they sent him back home. But as he was leaving, he said to me, "I'll deal with you when I get back." And oh my God, I was so afraid. I was like, he's gonna come back and he's gonna murder me. Like, he's gonna just, he's not gonna mess around. I literally just, for him, betrayed him. That being his child, I was selling him out to the police, right? And for him, what was right is that I stand in his corner, even though he's wrong, even though he's done all this stuff. But he wanted another level of understanding, a different level of loyalty, or whatever it was. And for him, that was a betrayal. And it was when he left that my mom said, she told me, she was like, that was what I was afraid of. Like, I put myself in the line of fire so he doesn't hurt you guys. Okay? I'm older, I can handle it. Yeah? But I don't want him to hurt you. So if I'd have said yes and they let him go, she's like, you think the system's gonna lock him away? You think they don't know? These are the same officers that come here every week, and they've seen what he does, right? And she was like, they can't help us. So we're in this on our own. And if he sees that we're trying to do that to him, who's going to pay for it? It's going to be us. And I was just devastated.
I think we both need a moment. I think.
Yeah. I guess like I said, haven't thought about this stuff in a long time. And it's buried so deep. There was one time when my dad, he was angry in the morning, and he came, it was on a Sunday, and I was supposed to go to the Gurdwara to go to the Punjabi class or something, right? And I didn't want to go. So it's like 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Who wakes up at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning? Okay. So my dad comes to my room, and I was 15, I think, 15, 16. I'm going to say 15. And I had some of my shoes near the door in my room, and one pair were these, like, the heel was maybe about like this big, like 3 inches or something, like those thick heels, and they were like black velvet sandals, right? And when he came into my room, and I was lying in the bed, and the door to the room was there, just like over my shoulder. So the bed's over here, and my head's like, so my head's here, like where it is, right? And from over there, he picked up the shoe and he threw it. And because I was laying on my front, it caught my cheekbone, and the heel ripped through the skin, and I had this huge cut on my face. And from here, I don't know if you can see, but this cheekbone from then was like just slightly more raised. Now when it happened, it didn't seem that bad, So I just like cleaned it up a little bit, and I got ready to go to the Gurdwara. Okay, I had this cut down my face, and I just put my chunni. So I didn't used to wear a dastar. I just like had my hair in a bun at the back, put the dupatta on, right, and I just used it to kind of cover my face a little bit. And I went to Punjabi class, and a couple of the guys who I also went to school with, they made a comment. One of the guys, he was like, he said something stupid. He was like, well, what's going on your face? And I remember my comment was, what I'm going to do to you if you don't shut up. And so that was my way to deal with it. And the next few days at school, I got called, like when I went, so this was at the Gurdwara, the Punjabi class, but then I went to regular school. I got pulled aside by one of the teachers and then called into like the headmaster's office as well, that is there something that you want to talk about? Do you need any help? And I, you know, my brothers had been to the same school. The teachers knew what our family dynamic was. They knew that my dad had a temper, right? But of course they couldn't intervene unless one of us asked them to.
Right.
And my two older brothers have been through this. They've been to this same school and they never reached out for help. So I'm not about to be that kid, because if that happens, I know what I have to deal with at home. Who am I more afraid of? The teachers or my dad? There was no competition. Like, I'm scared of my dad, right? Because I know what he's capable of. So I was like, no, everything's fine. And then they insisted that I go for counseling at least, right? So I had to see the school counselor once a week. So I'm walking around the school with this like big scar on my face, and people are making comments, and I would get into fights. I would be unapologetic about my behavior, and I was very angry. I was not as calm and collected as I am right now. This is something that I think I've had to earn and develop over the years, especially more so in the last like decade. But for a long time, my mum would say to me that I had my dad's anger, and that for me is not a compliment, because I don't want to be a monster, right? And when you read like even basic psychology, like 101, it's like the kids will mirror the parents' behavior. If they've seen some sort of an abuse, they will replicate that in their relationships. If they've been around aggressive people, they're going to be aggressive. And it's normal for kids who have suffered domestic violence to go on and, you know, subject others in their relationships to domestic violence. And I was like, this is not okay.
Or be victims
right?
of future domestic violence themselves.
Right, absolutely. Like you can be on either end of the spectrum, but you're all of a sudden more likely to find yourself in those situations again. And it was like, no, my mom saying this to me, like, you've got your dad's anger. And it wasn't that I was violent, like physically, but I would just like get very angry very quickly. But then as quick as I would get angry, I would cool down as quick. So it's like, you know, like this very crazy roller coaster that I would be on with my emotions. And so again, it doesn't justify the abuse, because we've talked about abuse now on a physical level, right? There's emotional abuse
I
as
want to
well.
ask you about that. Tell us more about the emotional abuse and how it affected your growth as a person, from a child to a young adult to an adult. How did the emotional abuse affect your relationship with yourself, with men, with family, the concept of family, with the concept of love? Tell us more.
The emotional abuse is far bigger than the physical abuse that I went through. I can deal with the cuts and the bruises and the broken bones. I can deal with that. I've healed through that physically. And they don't bother me. But the emotional abuse is, I don't know if I'll ever get through it, you know? That's the truth. Because I I'm still dealing with a lot of these things. That's what I'm realizing right now. Everything's been affected, from my personality to how I do things, how I behave. The hardest part of all of it is talking about my dad, because growing up, um, when I was much younger, my dad was my everything. Like I idolized him. The information and the access that I have now to spirituality was, first seeds were planted by him. So I've told you about his um, his alcohol abuse. I've told you about the physical violence, right? But he wasn't a bad person. He was the sort of person who would give you the shirt off his own back if it helped you. He wouldn't care whether you're driving around in a Mercedes. If you needed the shirt off his back, he would give it to you, right? So he was a great person, and I say was because he passed away.
So sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, 6 years ago now, but still, it's, not reconciled. It's still lots to process and to go through. And the difficult part is loving somebody so much, knowing the good within them, but not being able to see that same person that you love, that you think is amazing. It's heartbreaking to see whatever it is takes over through the alcohol, through the anger. I don't support the drinking of alcohol or intoxicants. Obviously for the obvious reasons that I've seen the negative side of it. There's no way that I would ever stand in the corner to promote those sorts of things, because they destroyed whatever I knew of family. They destroyed my childhood. They took away the love that should have existed within our family, right? Having him as my role model, as a child, I wasn't so connected to my mom. My dad was my best friend. I would go to work with my dad. I would hang out with him. I would, like, when he's going to go to the cash and carry to buy, the stock for the shop, I would go with him. I was like his little sidekick. And I would want to eat the same stuff that he's eating. I would sit with him, and it was like we were really close. And that was a different relationship to what he had with my brothers. So obviously when they were younger, it was like that. But as they grew older, that kind of fizzled out. And for he and I, the relationship changed once I hit puberty. It's almost like he didn't know what to do with me now, because before he could kind of pass me off as one of the boys and just, she's one of the lads. And I was very tomboyish for the obvious reasons, because I'm growing up in a male environment, right? That's all of the influence around me. I've got no connection with my femininity. So that's what I'm going to be. But it was cool. I was okay, But then as soon as my body started to change and, it was almost like, okay, now you go over there and you stay in the kitchen with your mom, because this is a boys' club, right? And boys don't have breasts, or they're not, maybe some do, but typically they don't, right? So now it's like, I don't know what to do with you. And yeah, okay, bye. And then I was like, okay, what do I do now? Like, now I couldn't go to work with my dad anymore. And I said this to my mom. I was like, why can't I go to work with him? And then she gave me the reasoning, because he would employ people, like other men who would come and work on the different construction sites or whatever, the houses and things that he's working on. And they're going to look at you differently now, right? Because you're a young woman, and he doesn't want to take the risk of anything happening to you. And it was always about this protection. right? So he wanted to protect me from the outside world. And that was sweet. Like, I get it, but as a kid, you don't get it. Once my dad kind of like pushed me to the side, right? Um, I couldn't go and huddle up with my mom because my mom and I had never really formed a strong bond. Like, we're in the same household. I'm protecting her. I love her. So I don't love her, but there was no connection. There was no, like, you know, I can come and talk to you about stuff. I can open up. I didn't have that. I didn't even have that with my dad where I could tell him everything, right? Um, and there were a lot of other ugly things that happened in my childhood as well, which I couldn't talk about. I couldn't tell anybody about that stuff because, firstly, who would I tell? And then what would happen? And if they don't believe me and that shit comes back on me, I'm I'm double screwed, right? So my dad had a tough time with my older brothers because they didn't do what he expected. And because they didn't conform to his expectations, um, and that made their relationships very difficult. He wanted them to follow a particular career path. They didn't want to. And it was like, stop trying to control my life or stop trying to live your dreams through me. And, you know, that those expectations were then put on to me, right? And I wanted nothing more than to please my dad.
Right.
I wanted to be his little girl again, you know? I wanted to just, you know, be best friends with him because I missed him. So I was like, you know what? Okay, as tough as it is, I'm going to do what he wants because that's going to make him happy. So I started to study sciences, even though I didn't like them. I did my GCSE and my A level in Punjabi, and I got good grades. And you know that when that was celebrated in the Gurdwara, you know, like my dad felt his moment of pride that okay, at least one of my kids can read Punjabi. I didn't do it because I enjoyed it. I didn't do it because I had this huge interest or fascination in wanting to read, you know, Punjabi novels. I did it because I wanted my dad back. We were talking about the emotions and how that abuse comes in. There's I think there's more than one type of it, but we'll talk about two types. One is the immediate processing of emotions through the physical violence, right? Because it causes you pain, it causes you confusion and conflict between the relationship, and then how you continue to operate in that same environment with these emotions and these feelings of pain and disappointment and hurt and letdown and wanting to have normality. Like it's extremely confusing. um Other types of abusive relationships, a close friend of mine, unfortunately he ended up taking his life because he was in an abusive relationship where uh the female partner in the relationship was the one who was, you know, she was the one being abusive. She wasn't violent, but the years and years of just negative comments and talking down to somebody, always blaming them, making them feel like shit, you know, it just, it wore him down. And it ended up in a very unfortunate result where he took his own life and left his wife and his kids behind. Um, so abuse is on different layers, right? You don't have to physically hit somebody to abuse them, right? But if you're constantly hammering away at somebody, telling them that they're worthless, that they're terrible and they're never going to make it, that's abuse. Um, my environment wasn't, it wasn't exactly that where somebody's talking down to me all of the time. It was the fear of being hit, the fear of being hit where there's permanent damage, um, the fear of losing life, my own or my family members, the fear of separation, um, and that weight emotionally within a child makes having healthy friendships, relationships, and just conversations difficult. because you don't know where to measure trust. There's no parameter anymore, right? In a normal situation, and I say normal means away from abuse, right? In a conversation, you'll build rapport, you'll find some common ground, you feel comfortable, like there's a feeling of like, oh, this is nice, right? And then something starts to open up, right? And then that allows you to develop trust. That allows you to develop relationships, right? Friendships and all sorts of other things as well. I didn't know how to do that stuff. A lot of my friends, when I would talk to them, close friends, supposedly close friends, about what was happening at home, they didn't believe me. They thought I was making it up. And that was the same when I told you that I was made to see a counselor at school. That one of the things I remember her saying to me is, you don't need to make things up here. And I was like, what? And I think that was the last time I went to see her.
Why do you think people don't believe children, women, men when they talk about abuse? Why do you think that they don't believe them?
I think it's a number of things. Firstly, what is your idea of normal? Because your idea of normal is different to my idea of normal. My idea of normal is built around what I've experienced in my life. Just the fact that I said growing up in my childhood, what was normal for me was to have either the police or the ambulance called at least once in a week, if not, several times within a week. That is not normal for every other person, right? Therefore, when you're hearing one person's reality in the ears of a person who doesn't know that to be normal or to be possible, they can't comprehend it. So the go-to is, they're making it up. That's bullshit. It can't have happened like that. You're making it up. That's an exaggeration, right? When my teachers are saying to me, go and speak to somebody who can help you, it was difficult for me to say yes. And then to get into that space, at first, like the first few meetings, I didn't even say anything. So I was like, I don't know what you want me to talk about. And I was just kind of making jokes and like just being a bit whimsical, like, there's nothing wrong with me. And only people who have something wrong with them go for counseling. So, maybe you should be seeing somebody else who actually needs it, because that's not me, right? And then as she started to just ask questions and probe a little, and I'm talking, I haven't even got into the emotions or the feelings. I think I talked to her about 2 incidents that had happened recently at that time at home. And the response I got is that she was trying to reassure me this is a safe space where you don't need to lie or exaggerate or make things up. But for me, how I received it is that, hey, you're bullshitting right now. And I was like, I don't need to do this. I don't need to like dig up my wounds and share them with somebody who's insensitive, who doesn't have the capacity to understand that my circumstances are different to the privilege that you've grown up with, right? I didn't have that same privilege. I didn't have a structure of a family. I didn't have role models. I didn't have the support that you would have had, or even the love that you would have had from your parents growing up, right? To grow up and to be an adult in a child's body, right? Because my instinct, my go-to instinct from age like 9 upwards, is like a clear memory for me, was to protect my younger brother and my mother. Because my older brothers would be out with their friends doing their thing, staying away from my dad because they're boys and they could go out, but I couldn't because I was a girl. But the most important job I had was to protect my brother, my younger brother, who's a baby, right? And my mom, because I didn't want her to get hurt anymore. So that, for me, all of that is emotional abuse. When you've taken away a child's childhood, what's left, right? Then you can't call it childhood.
Absolutely.
And you can't call that person a child either. because they're not in a situation that is child friendly. So anybody who's in that situation who thinks that these things are easy to heal through and forget about because you're a child and your young memory will forget, like, that's the biggest mistake you can make. The child memory stores the most information. It's in your adult years that you start to forget it, but as a child you don't forget it. And those things that really really hurt you, they never go anywhere. They stay as clear as the day they happened. Even when you're in your 90s, you remember it like it was yesterday. So I think that those are all misconceptions. My mom's angle in all of this is different. Like, the abuse that she went through physically was one thing, but emotionally, like, I see it on her. So I described that she was, tall, and she was, strong and beautiful. She didn't have a hearing problem when she got married. But over the years of abuse, and the blows that she took, they took away her hearing with every single one of those blows that struck her. And now she suffers with curvature in her spine. So, like when you see people and they're like hunched a little, right? So my mom in height is now smaller than me. So her spine has curved. If you look from the side, it would be like this, right? And nobody taught me this. I read about this. And I read a lot of books because I was worried about my mom's health. And emotions are something that the body houses. And the body houses them in different ways. It will find a vulnerable part, and then that's where they'll all go. So when something happens that reminds you of an old pain, you're like an old trauma, you'll feel physical pain in one part of your body. And for women, it's either the chest or the stomach, like the abdomen or the chest, because those are the two most emotionally sensitive areas of the body for women. And I remember that I used to have, like, when I was at university, I would have horrendous stomach pain for no reason. And I mean, it was agonizing. Sometimes I had to go to the hospital to get it checked out, and they were like, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. But I felt like I was dying or something because the pain was that bad. It took me a while to understand that it's all to do with trauma and emotions. So where we carry it and where we store it. For my mom, she's literally carried it in all of her body, in her spine, and her spirit is still strong. My mom isn't someone, like, she's sweet and she's adorable, but if you get on her bad side, then that's it. That's the place you don't want to be. You don't want to be on her bad side, right? But I don't know how she did it. Like, we're talking about me, like, going through that as a child and to get to here. But when I see my mum now, and I see that she's still grateful, she's lost a lot, not just her health. She lost one of her sons. She lost her husband as well, as abusive as he was, right? And this all happened in, the last, how long has it been? 8 years. To lose 2 members of your household within a 2-year time gap.
I'm so sorry about that.
Yeah. So my brother, his life was taken. And I've talked about that briefly before, but I don't know if it was racist, but it was a white person who took my brother's life, right? And like, if I'm just singling out that one part of my mom's whole story, or even my story, that's enough to mess you up, right? And then the whole trauma to go just around that one incident, like, just single it out, just that one thing, losing your son, having to bury him, having to deal with a whole court case, a murder court case for your son, and then having to process those emotions afterwards. That's going to fuck you up straight up, right? Now, add that on top of all of these other things that I told you, and I haven't even told you the whole story, right? I'm like, how do you come through this and still be grateful? how can you still have an outlook on the world and say it's going to be okay? Like, I just, I don't know, because at that time, when my brother passed, that was when I hit a type of a rock bottom. And I was already on my spiritual path, okay? So I was like journeying through, finding goodness, trying to make connection, trying to figure it all out, like, oh, what does this all mean? How does it all connect? And all of that stuff, right? And I thought I had it. I thought I knew how to deal with things, right? And then life throws this fucking crazy ass curveball, right? And I was not this person. I was not this person at all. I was a sister grieving. I was a human outraged that this can happen in this day and age in such a gruesome way. Yes, justice was served, but that doesn't change anything. It doesn't bring back the life. It makes another mother part with her son. And that was what my mom said to me.
Wow. My God.
When this guy got arrested and he's gone down for life, and I asked my mom how she feels, and she was like, I'm just looking at his mom. How's she going to live without her son now? So both of us lost our sons. And I was like, how? Like, how do you have compassion for that woman who bore a murderer where she can still see him in prison? How do you have compassion? Like, what?
I don't even know what to say. I mean,
It's like, it's right. And I didn't know what to say. And I'm the one on this spiritual path. I'm supposed to friggin' have my shit together and know, right? Just like, she was my teaching point. I don't know how it works. Okay, I wish I had a formula. I wish I could say that, okay, if you do this, then this will happen, and that's guaranteed. I can't say that because in my household, like I said, there were 4 kids. I'm one of the 4, okay? And we all had different journeys, very, very different journeys. I know that if you stay strong and if you stay connected with yourself, and if you believe that things can be better, then one day they will be better because your energy will create them to be better. And sometimes me and my younger brother, we talk about this now. We're so far away from all of those things. It's almost like they're a distant memory sometimes, and we don't talk about it. We don't sit there and discuss, oh, when this happened, when that happened, and do you remember it? Because it's painful for all of us to just balance how it feels is different now to how it was then. But it took a long time to get to here. And I wish that these situations didn't exist for anybody, but they do exist. And what I missed as a child was role models, was people to trust, was feeling cared about.